welcome to episode 107. There is no better time than right now to plan your vacation getaway. Don't have the time to plan? Use the friendly travel agents at 3D Travel Company by going to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and clicking the Book Now button today on the left-hand side. Hurry and plan your trip today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest is best known for voicing the character Rhinox from Transformers Beast Wars. Stay tuned for our clip and then an amazing interview with today's special guest.
I'd say it's trampoline time. This is suicide. We gotta pull back.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show I am super excited to be bringing you an interview with Richard Newman. Richard, thank you so very much for joining me today.
It is a pleasure to be here, sir.
Well, it is an honor to have you with me, sir. So thank you so much for giving me some of your valuable time today to chat.
Well, I'm not sure how valuable it is actually, but no, I love chatting with the folks. It's always been a great since I fell into the whole voiceover thing. It's the fandom is really quite an incredible place to be, and it's always a pleasure to talk to the folks.
Well, Richard, it is super exciting to be chatting with you today, so I do thank you. And we're going to dive into some amazing stuff that you've worked on today. But the very first thing we love to do when we have a guest on the show is get to know who our special guest is, Richard. So tell me about the little boy Richard that grew up into the man he is today, and how did he get into acting, and more specifically, voice acting?
Wow. Oh, my gosh. You have a few hours, do you? Well, I was one of those kids. I started writing, shows and getting my neighbors to act in them and performing for for our parents and for my classmates and stuff. I don't think I've ever wanted to do anything else but be somebody other than who I actually was. So yes, I was writing plays and putting them on with my grade school pals.
Wow.
And then of course, went through the high school drama department and went to university in Central Illinois. I went to Knox College in Central Illinois.
Awesome.
And having been born in Chicago. And then from there to San Francisco to the American Conservatory Theater, where I studied for a year, and then went to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and then wound up getting a job doing a children's theater tour out of Vancouver, Canada, and fell in love with Canada and Vancouver and the mountains and the ocean, and I've just kind of been here ever since.
Wow.
The voiceover thing, it's kind of funny. I've been doing stage work and film and television work, and the voice thing in Vancouver took off, I guess, to the mid to the late 80s. And I thought, oh, what a great, fun type thing to do. So I started auditioning for stuff, and auditioning for stuff, and auditioning for stuff. And I didn't get anything, and I was just about ready to just throw in the towel on that particular end of the industry. And I wound up getting 3 roles in a 40-episode cartoon series that was done over the summer of 1989, I think it was.
Wow.
A thing called Video Power, which basically took a half a dozen video games and took all the heroes from the video games and pitted them against the villains from those video games. So it was basically a half an hour commercial, as so many of these shows wind up being, for the various games and toys that the manufacturer are coming up with. But once you got your foot in the door, it's sort of like this, everything opens up. So yeah, it's been a great, going on 89, 99, 09, 19, going on 30 years.
That's amazing, Richard. That's a great career, man. Wow.
Well, in fact, I've been doing this for now pretty close to half a century, between the stage work and the film work and the voice work. So, Yeah, I guess I have made a life of this after all, haven't I?
Yes, sir, you certainly have. You know, you've done a lot of amazing works, and the very first one that we're really going to dive into, Richard, is Mega Man, where you played
Wow.
Spark, Mandril, and Woodman. What was it like getting to work on that show with such a great cast? And Ian James Corlett was the voice of Mega Man. This was a series that I absolutely fell in love with because the way the animation was done and the voice acting that was done on this, it was superb. The scripts were amazing, and the cast was just stellar. What was it like getting to work on this particular project, Richard?
Well, as you say, I think you've actually answered your own question. It was a well-written, well-directed, a really great bunch of guys in the studio.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be said for pretty much anything that I've done here. Vancouver is just chock-a-block with talent,
Yeah.
and really nice folks. I mean, any time that I get called into the studio and I can look around and I see Gary Chalk or Ian Corlett or Jim Burns or any number of the Scotty McNeil, it's just, oh, goody, it's my pals and we get to play.
Yeah.
It's the most amazing thing to be called into work, and basically, yeah, you're called into a playground, because they are. I mean, the energy is just bubbling over. Every so often, you have to open the door to let some fresh air in the room, because otherwise we'd all just start passing out.
That's so funny.
But
Wow.
yeah, that was a quite a fun. I didn't do that many episodes of Mega Man, but I did enjoy the times that I was called in. That's for sure.
That's fantastic. Well, it's definitely a show that left an imprint on my mind, and in my opinion, it's the best series for Mega Man that's ever been done. And it's amazing how many shows have been done in Canada. I didn't realize how many shows really were voiced and created and done up in Canada until I started doing my show back in August of 2016. But it's
Right.
just amazing. Some of the works that come out of Canada, I would say, are just fantabulous. They're amazing. So.
Well, I was in Toronto in 1997, doing a production of Angels in America, and started doing some work for a studio called Nelvana there, that's tied in with Disney, and that's where I did Franklin the Turtle and Pippi Longstocking and Donkey Kong Country and a whole bunch of other stuff there. So between Toronto and Vancouver, and there are studios in pretty much every major city in Canada.
Yeah.
But no, there's quite a lot of work that goes on up here.
That's fantastic.
And I'm quite pleased about that.
Absolutely. I'm sure you are. Well, Richard, the next very, very amazing project we're going to dive into today was called Street Fighter, which was directed by Sue Blue, the wonderful Sue Blue. And
gorgeous and multi-talented Sue Blue.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. But I still have yet to have her on the show, but I am aiming to do that. But, you were part of the main cast of Street Fighter. The series went from 95 to 1997. It was an animated show, of course, and you played M. Bison, better known as just Bison, on that show. And what was it like getting to work with that stellar cast of people on such an iconic game that was turned into an animated series?
Well, that was really fun. I love playing the villains. The Bison and Phaeton in Exo Squad. It's some really lovely writing. And of course, it was my daughter a couple of years ago. I have to admit to being somewhat of a technophobe. I only got onto Facebook a couple of years ago when my daughter moved to New York and said, if you want to hear from me ever again, this is what you must do.
Ultimatums, huh?
So, but even before that, I was sitting in my office at home one day and she shouts at me, Dad, were you in a show called Street Fighter? And I went, oh gosh, yes, 20 years ago, I think it was by that point. And she said, well, there's a meme of you.
Oh, wow.
Saying, this is delicious. Yes, yes. And it's got 1 million hits.
That's awesome.
And I just went, I mean, I didn't understand even what was going on. Getting on Facebook, one of the first people I heard from was a wonderful man named Colin Douglas, who is T.F. Khan.
Yeah.
And he's brought me to 3 or 4 cartoon conventions since he realized I was still alive and still on the planet. Because, of course, now I had a presence on a social network, you see.
Yeah.
It's been quite an eye-opener. I don't think I I guess I've said this a lot when I've been interviewed at conventions and also in podcasts. I had no idea. We always go and we do our best.
Yeah.
If it's a film, if it's a stage play, if it's a voiceover, I don't care what it is. I want to be as good as I can possibly be.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you forget about it because basically it's done. It's out there and it's happening, and whoever sees it, sees it. I did not have any clue as to the size of the fandom of some of these shows until I got on Facebook and people began to contact me to tell me how much these shows had meant to them.
Yeah.
So as much fun as they were to do, as much pride as I take in doing as good a job as I can always do, to learn how much this has meant to people is just been revelatory. It's been such an eye-opener. My younger brother was part of the 1950s polio epidemic.
Oh, wow.
So he's basically, long story short, he lives in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And he dreams that he's running. And he hasn't run since he was 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
So when I see people come to a Transformers convention in wheelchairs or with obvious physical challenges, and I realize that we have given these folks a dream, it's like Avatar, like you get into the exosuit and suddenly you're whole.
Yeah.
You transform and suddenly you're whole. It changed my life. It changed my whole, not my attitude, because the attitude's always the same. The attitude is always take it seriously and do your best.
Yeah.
But in terms of understanding what it means to some folks, I had no idea, and it's been a very humbling experience to learn how much support, positive energy people have gotten from some of these shows. It's really neat.
Wow, Richard, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really special to hear, and I'm so sorry to hear about your brother. But, it's amazing that, there are people that, despite their challenges in life or their disabilities, that some of these shows can impact them and inspire them and motivate them in ways that we just never could have imagined in our lives.
Well, a sidebar about my brother, because just to give you this information.
Yeah.
He strengthened his upper body to the point where he was a gymnast.
Wow.
And he worked on the rings, and he worked on the high bar, and he worked on the parallel bars. He had to strap his legs together.
Yeah.
But he became captain of his high school gymnastics team, president of the athletic club.
Good Lord.
And until he got to university, where at that point, of course, they were going to take points off for him wrapping his legs together. But he was given a break in high school because people appreciated so much the guts that he had. And he's much more of an athlete than I ever was, that's for sure.
That's amazing. What an amazing story to hear that your brother took, a challenge like that and turned it into a positive thing and was able to become a gymnast. I mean, what an amazing story. I love that.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of friends and family who have, I look at the challenges that other people have overcome,
Yeah.
have worked with, and I think, how can I possibly ever feel sorry for myself?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm living the dream, basically. So
yeah,
it's
wow.
Quite a life.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, thank you so much for sharing that about your brother and about the wonderful impact the stories have had on people from the different shows you've been a part of. One of the shows that's been a huge impact on my life, you've done some amazing works. Mega Man was a huge show for me, but the one that I very first became attached with the name of Richard Newman was a show called Beast Wars, which came out in 1996, where you played Rhinox, who I would classify as kind of the wise general type, second in command for the most part, I think, as a whole under Optimus Primal. Just a very amazing character. Loved him a lot. And what was it like getting to work on that show? Again, you worked with David Kay, who played Megatron, Gary Chalk, Optimus Primal, Ian James Corlett, who was Cheetor, David Sobolov, who was, his name escapes me, it was like a Stingray character on the show. Depth Charge, I believe it was.
Right.
Yes. Those are just four of the other cast members I've had on the show. And there was tons of others.
Jimmy Burns and Alec Willows and Doug Parker, Venus Terzo. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to leave people out because there were so many folks who passed through that studio over the 2 or 3 years that we worked. Blue, of course, and Paulette.
Yeah.
First convention I ever went to, I think, was with Blue and Scott and Paulette.
Oh, nice.
Or Pauline, rather. Newsom, and gosh, yes, no, great bunch. And again, originally, I think the first director of that was Sue Blue as well.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And the writing, which was so incredible. Sue is an amazing director, and that show especially, we became a family over the time that we worked together.
How couldn't we?
It was, well, I mean, for one thing, we've all known each other for years by this point. And again, you walk into the studio and you go, oh, it's all my friends. So let's have some fun.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, if you were to see us sometimes in the studio, you would think, are these guys adults? Because it does it gets really quite silly.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, the silliness keeps the energy up, and keeps the show alive and keeps the characters alive.
Yeah.
So the director, though sometimes she had to kind of crack a bit of a whip, I think at the same time she really enjoyed the energy because, of course, it permeated the whole project.
Oh yeah. Well, that's awesome.
But no, I liked playing Rhinox. I was a bit surprised, actually. David Kay and Gary Chalk and I, those three roles, in my mind, and I can't actually remember now how I figured the casting would run down, but I was quite surprised the way it worked out.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be playing the good guy.
Not expecting to play a Maximal, huh?
Well, it was sort of that, I guess. I was so used to being cast as the villain that to be, to even be called in to play, basically, yes, and a scientist. I mean, really? I almost failed biology, like idiot biology. So.
That's funny. Well, it's sometimes those roles that we're unexpecting that give us the opportunity to kind of break out of our norm and try something new. So
it's and the wonderful thing about animation, I'm 5'8", maybe I weigh 140 pounds soaking wet, and Rhinox is the hugest Maximal.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm in a Q&A at a convention, somebody will say, now, wait a minute, what do you guys played Rhinox? Because it's just a bunch of tiny old men up there, I mean, where does that voice come from?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it comes from genetics. My father had a lovely, lovely, deep voice. He was raised in South Carolina, so he not only had a deep voice, but he had this very charming drawl.
Oh, nice.
And I inherited it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sing, and I sing. I have a very, very low voice, and it always surprises people when they hear me hit some of those bottom notes.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really glad we got to dive into Rhinox a little bit. That show was an amazing show, and considering that Scotty McNeil got to play Dinobot and Rat Trap and several others, I'm surprised.
And Silverbolt and
Silverbolt.
And yes.
I'm surprised
Scotty.
you didn't get a chance to play one of the villains too. That would have been fun if they'd let you cross over a little bit too. But
well, in fact, when the idea of Tankor came along, they did audition me for Tankor.
Okay.
And then they decided that they didn't want to even have a hint of Rhinox's voice in that character.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They wanted it to be a complete and total surprise when that reveal happened. So basically, I think it was Beast Machines. I think it was that I wasn't even in the first, half dozen episodes or something.
Yeah.
And then came in for a couple of episodes, and then joined the spark.
Well, and Beast Machines didn't quite have the oomph that Beast Wars did, but it was a good show as well. And, it was kind of a continuation of Beast Wars, but it was a little bit different in the animation and the style of everything. But it was kind of an interesting, different take on it, I think,
Well, I thought it was an interesting story departure. I know a lot of the fans were really, really choked.
Yeah.
They did not like the fact that Rhinox's character went through that change. I've heard from a lot of folks at conventions how displeased they were about that. At the time, I mean, the only thing that displeased me was I wasn't in those first half dozen episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, I certainly get that people, it's amazing that you can become, I guess, and that's a really thrilling thing for me. What a compliment that people become so attached to a character that when the character changes, they really, are upset by it.
Yeah.
So that's quite a compliment, actually, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, because you become so fond of that character and the way it's portrayed that it's kind of like Kevin Conroy playing Batman. A lot of people really don't want to see anyone else play Batman, but as the years have gone on, we started to see newer actors playing those roles, and it's just part of life. But people do become so attached to certain characters, like Mark Hamill as the Joker and so on and so forth, that it's just so hard to see anyone else try to play him after they've become so iconic.
I absolutely hear that.
And Rhinox is very much like that. I mean, the Beast Wars characters, I would say out of all Transformers shows, I know the Beast Wars characters inside and out compared to any other Transformers show ever. So
right. Yeah, that would make sense because, again, the writing was so good.
It was solid, and it was just the stories were captivating, and it was a whole new perspective on the bots, getting to see them as animals instead of cars and trucks and airplanes and stuff, So it was very, very unique. Very, it separates it from the franchise in a way that it's still part of Transformers, but it really makes it pop out in a different way from the other shows, I think.
Yes, I haven't seen any actual physical violence between Beast Wars and Gen 1 fans, although sometimes the argument can get a little fierce and loud.
I bet it can, for sure. Well, the next thing we're going to talk about, as Beast Wars was kind of coming to an end from 96 to 99, you started working on, or right after that ended, you started working on a show called Spider-Man Unlimited, where Reno Romano played Spider-Man in this rendition, and this came following the footsteps of the 94 series that went for 5 seasons, where we saw an amazing show spawn into Spider-Man Unlimited. Unfortunately, it didn't get the momentum that we were hoping for.
It died on the vine. I was very disappointed because it was a really neat idea. The writing was really good, and I loved the fact that I was playing both Jonah Jameson and the High Evolutionary. I thought that was going to go someplace. I was quite surprised that got canceled, and NASCAR Racers went on for 2 seasons. I didn't understand that either. But I guess that's just my particular taste, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, I am a huge fan of Spider-Man Unlimited. It's actually available on Hulu to be watched. So I've actually watched the series again since I was a kid. Because as a kid, they aired kind of out of order because the show didn't actually go to completion through the original
We never
network.
did. I don't think we even did 13 episodes. So yeah, it wouldn't have gone into syndication or anything like that.
And so like when it started airing, it was all kind of out of order, and there wasn't a lot of like order to the series. So now they've got it on Hulu, and you can watch it from 1 all the way till I think it's about 10 or 12 episodes, somewhere in there. But it's really good to get to see the whole series in its entirety. It was sad that it didn't continue on, but I know there were some other shows that kind of took priority, and times a change sometimes. And unfortunately, certain shows just don't go as good as they're hoping, so.
And if the toys don't sell, the show don't last.
And that too, which is really sad.
That's
it's like sad that it's all based on toy sales a lot of times.
Pretty much, because it's wonderful when they write, good scripts and they hire good people and the show has class. But where they're making their money is in the sales of the paraphernalia. Yeah. So that's I guess why Hasbro has taken over the con now. So there's no more the BotCon. It's now totally a Hasbro thing because they want to make sure that they're controlling all the sales.
Yeah. Yeah. Making sure their brand is represented the way they want and stuff. Sometimes it's understandable why certain things happen. Disney's particular about their entities, and I'm sure Hasbro is the same. Any company is going to want the representation of their characters to be done in the right light, and that's understandable,
Well, well, exactly that. I mean, they're the folks writing the checks.
Yeah.
And we're the folks saying what they want us to say.
Yes. But becoming iconic so much so that people are going to die to have that Transformers rendition of Rhinox when it gets re-released or revamped or whatever, whenever they bring out a new toy line. So it's really cool to see some of those things happen when they bring out toy lines, even after 20 or 30 years of the show being out.
Again, that just amazes me that, yes, I go to these conventions and people are bringing me new toys to sign or look at that I haven't seen before, and it's based on characters who haven't been drawn in 20 years. It's quite something. And the art, of course. I mean, all the wonderful artists with their wonderfully imaginative ideas of where these characters might go were they still doing something today.
Yeah.
Just wow. It's a fabulous universe, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, it is really cool that you got to play the High Evolutionary and J. Jonah Jameson. Originally in the 94 Fox series from Fox Kids, we got to see Ed Asner voice J. Jonah Jameson. So you got to play that role following him. And so that's a huge legacy for that character. And I'm really glad that you got to be a part of it for sure, because J. Jonah has always been a favorite of mine.
Well, he's yeah. I always enjoyed the character.
He's the guy I love to hate,
Yeah, exactly. Yes. He looks like a Marine Corps sergeant.
Yeah, he's always a pain in the rear, but without him, you just wouldn't have that antagonisticness that you need for Spider-Man to be like, oh, Jonah, like.
Well, that's it. He's sort of like the tough love father, you know. So,
yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk about two other projects, and then we will start wrapping the interview up. The first of the two is X-Men Evolution, where you played Omega Red back in 2000.
Right.
And Omega Red is a really cool character, and it was awesome that you got to play on that show. David Kaye, of course, was Professor X, and you got to play on some of the other X-Men were from previous shows you'd worked on, Beast Wars and such, and so it was really cool to get to see you come into this series. What was it like getting to work on an X-Men entity from Marvel?
Well, now, that show, it seems to me that I just did the one episode.
Oh, just one? Okay. I haven't seen the whole series on that one, so I wasn't sure.
Right. Now, I'm trying to recall because people talk about Omega Red, and it's something that I don't actually recall that well, and I think it's because it was only the one episode.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that it wasn't actually an ADR thing. I don't know that it was recorded prelay.
Okay.
So it may be that I just went in, because that's what the ADR thing is. It's very different when you're doing something like Beast Wars. All the actors are in the room at the same time, and we're all looking at the script for the same time, and at the same time, and working off each other.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the dialogue replacement, basically you're in a room by yourself, and all you see is your lines. So it's difficult to know what's happening in the show.
Yeah.
Other than what the director says, you need to be more aggravated here, or you're talking to so-and-so here. So he just kind of runs you through it. But you're basically in the studio for an hour or two, and you do a half a dozen episodes, just all of your lines in those episodes. So it becomes a little more difficult to remember some of those gigs, because you're sort of in and out, and you did it once, and it was 2 hours of your life, and now it's done.
And now for all time, it's in concrete, and everybody remembers it but you.
Well, what I should do, because people have talked about that role, I should actually look it up and watch it so that I can remember what the heck it was. Because that's the other thing about, I've been doing this for half a century, and sometimes the one-offs, the 2 hours that I spent doing a thing, it's gone when I'm, as soon as I leave the studio.
And it may become super iconic, and it's something you don't recall.
Exactly. It's quite bizarre. Bizarre. Well, that's the ADR thing, as I say. It's especially when you spend 2 hours on a character and you didn't know much about it beforehand, and you never hear of it again.
Yeah,
so
totally understand. Well, the last and final show and character we're going to dive into is another rendition where you got to come back with some of your fellow Beast Wars mates and some of the other shows you worked on. Everyone kind of cumulatively was in this show. Transformers Cybertron back in 2005. This was the year I graduated high school, back in 2005. And you played Vector Prime on that show. What was it like getting to play Vector Prime?
Well, this again, Cybertron was another ADR series. So again, I was in the studio by myself doing Vector Prime. But because Vector Prime figured all the way through the series, I got to know the character a bit better and got to know a little bit more what was going on.
Yeah.
I like working with people. I've never been tempted to do a one-person show. I've not got that kind of an ego. Not necessarily an ego. I think that's a value judgment, isn't it? I like looking at somebody else. I like talking to somebody else. I want to be involved with another character when I'm on stage or in the studio. So it's never as much fun to do ADR as it is to do a prelay show. But Vector Prime, having said that, Vector Prime was such a neat character. And he kind of had a really nice arc, and again, he became a really fun character to play. Now, there is a wrinkle. And this, again, has to do with the very nature of ADR.
Yeah.
Vector Prime had an English accent.
Yes.
They wanted an English accent. They decided when we did the first record of the first, I don't know how many episodes, half dozen episodes.
Yeah.
And, of course, we did all those first 6 episodes or so at the same recording session. And then 3 or 4 months later, I get called in to do another half dozen episodes as Vector Prime. And nobody remembered that he'd had an English accent.
Wow.
And they did not have, usually they would have in studio, they'd have your voice ref. This is the voice you did the last time, but for some reason, they didn't have it. And the director said, well, just, do what you do, and I'm sure that'll be fine. So I did it, and without the accent. And then the next time I was called in, it was like they had the voice ref, and it had an English accent. And I said, oh, gee, I didn't use an English accent last time. What should we do? Well, we'll go back to the English accent. That's what we got cast as. Shall we go back and re-record these other episodes? No, we're not going to do that because they've already been released. They're already out there.
Yeah.
So for those who are paying attention, yes, the place of Vector Prime's birth changes over the course of the first while.
Yeah.
Then we remembered because, as I say, it went on for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good show. It was a good rendition of Transformers and one of my favorites, especially with Gary Chalk playing Optimus on that, and good cast of people working on that show for sure.
Well, it was really neat, too, because like the various... because Gary got to play Optimus through several different iterations of the Transformers series, and David got to play Megatron through various iterations. So it was really neat to kind of revisit these characters through the different stories and see how they changed and how they stayed the same,
Absolutely.
how they were able to maintain a consistency. So, yes, it was just such a fun thing to do.
Absolutely.
It's like I sometimes think, can I get paid to do this? That's amazing. That really is amazing.
It is pretty fantastic, Richard.
Well, I'll tell you, I consider myself to be one of the lucky ones. That's for sure. I feel I've had a blessed life.
I would totally agree with you. Totally.
Just love what I do. I have a great kid who's in New York now, trying to make her living as an actor.
Nice.
And life is good. Life is good. I'm looking forward to what's next.
Absolutely, Richard. Well, I have 3 final questions for you, and we will wrap this interview up. The first one is, what is your social media? How can people reach out to you, whether they have fan-based questions or maybe they're looking to work with you on a voiceover project in the future?
I have a website and a Facebook page. The website is Richard Newman VO, and I can be gotten a hold of that way. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm all those sorts of things, easily findable. So, and my agency, Lauren Levitt and Associates, is located in Vancouver. That should be if anybody seriously wants to hire me to do something, that would be the way to go about that.
Fantastic.
They're findable, and so am I.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information, Richard. The last 2 questions are, what is the advice you would give to somebody who's looking at joining this world of acting, and more specifically, maybe trying to get into the niche of voice acting? Well,
it's all acting. I mean, voice, stage, film, it's all acting. And my advice to anybody who wants to be an actor is to study acting. There are things that you can learn to do with your voice, things you can learn to do with your body, learning how to analyze a script, learning how to come up with interesting characters. It's like anything else that you want to do in life. You have to study. And I was went to university, went to theater school. These are all the sorts of. My daughter is in New York taking classes with voice and dance coaches, and you basically need to study and the things that you need to know to act with your voice. You need to just know how to act. So yeah, that's my advice. Go to study theater.
I love it, Richard. Thank you so much for sharing your advice with fans out there, whether they're Transformer fans or Mega Man fans or whatever it be. I'm sure the advice will ring loudly to them and hopefully to others as well who hear our interview. The last question I have for you today is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind, Richard?
Wow. Ooh. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
I'll tell you. I did a show about 20 years ago. 30 years ago. One of the first plays about AIDS, a show called As Is. And it was in 1986, and the disease was still kind of, people didn't know what the heck it was, and everybody was scared, and people were really turning off the entire gay community because of this bizarre disease. And I was in Florida doing this show where my folks lived, and my folks came and saw the show. And my father, who was a little ambivalent about homosexuals, to say the least, and after the show, I asked him, so what did you think? And he hemmed and he hawed. And after a while, he said, well, I guess I never thought about it like that before. And that, to me, was a magic moment. When we were doing Angels in America, and people with AIDS would write to us and say, thank you for telling our story. These are magic moments for me. The world changes one mind at a time. And, a legacy, I don't know. I'm I'm having too good a time to think about a legacy.
Yeah.
But if I can open people's minds up, if I can make life better for women and children and people of color and people with, who are don't fit societal norms, then I've done what I set out to do, I guess. Try to make the world a little bit better place than it was when I got here.
I like that, Richard. That's an excellent legacy, and I really appreciate how much you're willing and wanting to change the world, and I think you absolutely are doing just that.
Well, thanks. Thanks, sir.
You're very welcome, Richard. Well, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us the honor of closing out the show as Rhinox from Beast Wars?
Well, I'd be happy to. I've had a really good time chatting with you today, and I'd just like to say, I hope the spark informs you all. This is Richard Newman. It's been a pleasure talking to you today on Who Did That Voice?
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Richard Newman, the voice of Rhinox from Transformers Beast Wars, and so much more. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. A question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us next time for our special guest, Hiro Kanaga, the voice of Mr. Fantastic from Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.